Kevin Spacey is here. He is an Oscar-winning actor. He's also the leading face of House of Cards, Netflix groundbreaking political drama. He stars as Francis Underwood, the Southern congressman who has murdered his way into the highest office of American government. New York Times calls him one of the most morally bankrupt presidents to ever come out of Hollywood. President Obama has said he is a guy who is getting a lot of stuff done. All 13 episodes of House of Cards' third season were released on Netflix last month. Here is a look.
You want to know what takes real courage? Holding it all together when the stakes are this high.
I am pleased to have Kevin Spacey back at this table. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me once again.
Yes. How's everything at the Old Vic?
Very well. I'm on stage as we speak, doing my last production as an actor, as I'm still artistic director, and I will give up that post.
You continue to be, you're giving that up too?
I'm giving that up at the, essentially the August is when Matthew Warchus, who is a fantastic director who did Matilda on Broadway, recently did that wonderful British film Pride, and directed me and Jeff Goldblum in Speed the Plow, as well as our great productions of the Norman Conquest. He's taking over my role.
Okay. We've talked about that much, and I'd like to come back to it. But right now, Frank Underwood.
Yeah.
He's in power.
Yeah.
This is about governance in part.
Yeah. We were very, look, it's very interesting because some people have said, you know, well, now that he's president, you know, he's accomplished what he set out to do. And you go, well, wait a second. You know, first of all, yes, it is true that getting to the presidency, even though he may have done it in rather elusive ways, by, for example, not running for office.
Yes, that's right.
That's one particular kind of challenge, getting to the White House. But I actually think that's one thing. But actually then governing what you want to accomplish as president is then a whole nother, you know, that it's only just getting started. And one of the things I think that we've had a really interesting time exploring this third season is you take two characters like Francis and Claire, who have successfully managed to do very well in the shadows and in the dark alleys. What happens to them when they're suddenly in the hot white spotlight of the presidency? There are no more shadows. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen, A, to what they try to achieve, and B, what happens to them
and how they
as a
exercise
couple.
power.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, tell me how you see him. Patriot?
I think
servant of the country?
I think that he believes that his job in politics is to get things done, and that if he has to
justifies the means.
Yeah, and if you know, I mean, look, if you set aside the murdering, just for a moment, just for a second, just set aside over here for just a second. You know, look, one of the things I loved about the Lincoln film was that they were willing to show Lincoln as a politician. Yeah. You know, he was willing to do what he had to do to get those votes to end slavery in this country because he felt that was more important than giving someone a role or an assignment or an office.
Even if it meant locking up politicians.
Yeah, but today, of course, that would be a scandal.
But there's also this. If you ask Bo and others, and maybe you, they say Frank Underwood is two-thirds Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was a guy who got things done. I mean, legislatively, you can talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. You also can talk about the Voting Rights Bill, which they did in the film Selma.
That's right. Look, I think also it's an interesting thing that you know, we're examining as well, which is that Johnson, for his entire congressional career, was on the opposite side of the civil rights movement. There is no doubt about it. But when he became president, I think, A, because of the way he became president, feeling that it was his obligation to try to continue President Kennedy's mandate. He saw the presidency as a place where you can, in fact, get something like that done, and that's what he sought out to do. Now, obviously, he took a lot of stick for Vietnam.
Kennedy. On civil rights, he did more than Kennedy had done after he became president. Yeah. And, in fact, he said, and perhaps if Kennedy had a longer time in the second term, he might have done that. But he also said, Lyndon Johnson did, if you can't do this, what's the presidency for?
Exactly. What's it for?
You know?
And obviously the March in Selma had a lot to do with pushing that agenda even further for Johnson.
But back to the idea of Frank Underwood and how he seems to have, I mean, mafia chieftains, they know who they are. They know what they're about. They're about making money, keeping the family together.
I'm making an offer you couldn't refuse.
We could do this. We just do this for me. I beg you, do this for me. What would Bill Clinton say about?
I love that House of Cards. No, it's so good.
And Johnny Carson would say about it, House of Cards.
Well, I'd binge, but I'm too busy writing monologue. I can't binge. Hi. We'll be right back.
Oh, God, they're so good at that. But this year, it opens urinating on his father's grave, saying that when you become president, you have to be a little human.
Yeah, because for the press, they think he's there honoring his father. But in private, of course, he's got other feelings. Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment. That there are certain things, and you've covered politics for a long time. We watch when politicians who are not particularly good at putting across their own humanity, that they have to sort of do things. They got to go to rallies and they got to go to bake-offs and they got to wear silly hats and all of that because it sort of makes money.
Louis B. Mayer, one of those Hollywood chieftains, who said, what you need to do is be sincere. And once you get that down,
that's right.
You can do anything.
Once you get sincerity down, you can accomplish anything. That's right. Yeah.
But there is some criticism, basically saying, this governance is not as interesting and as compelling and as exciting as all the things that Frank did to get here. How he used people, manipulated people. Machiavellian was an amateur compared to Frank Underwood.
Well, I think that, look...
And that can't be as exciting.
Well, I think, look, you can either continue to repeat yourself and think that, we're going to just do well. I've heard criticisms, there isn't enough talking into the camera this season as there was in the previous seasons. But
we like that.
Look, we are interested in exploring a lot of different things and going to a lot of different territory. And I think when you take the season as a whole, I think we've gone to a lot of new places and a lot of very interesting places. And I was thrilled to do it, and I'm delighted that it's out there. But I also fully, we kind of have to expect that the more a show goes on and the more attention it gets, the more criticism it's going to get as well.
How wrong would I be if I said the first two seasons were really much more about Frank Underwood and how he achieved power? And this season will have more of a focus on the relationship between the two of them.
I would say that that's fair. I would always say that from the beginning it was a story about this particular relationship, and that what the first two seasons did was set up this season. If the first two seasons had been as focused on the two of them, I don't think you would have gotten as much of the world of the politics, even though it's a fictional
You see what
world.
The potential is by doing it the way you did the first two seasons.
I think so, yeah.
What is the attraction between the two of them?
I think it's deep, monumental
love of power.
I think there's a lot of things going on. People seem to be very intrigued by them and often say things to me like, they're so unconventional. And I go, really? How many marriages do you know? How many conventional marriages do you know, number one? And how many marriages do you know that aren't exactly that? A partnership, a bond, something which two people might have tremendous respect and love for each other, but they also might be in the family business, as you indicate. I don't think that they're that unusual as a couple. Now, there may be people who say, but they're obsessed with power and they want it so bad. But I would say that it's maybe one of the reasons why people like looking at them so much is they do recognize things in both of them that are more familiar.
Roll tape. This is a clip I think you selected. Take a look at this and see what it says.
If this is going to be Johnny Carson, I'll be really surprised. If I select him.
Do you really want to discuss courage, Claire? Because anyone can commit suicide or spout their mouth in front of a camera. But you want to know what takes real courage? Keeping your mouth shut, no matter what you might be feeling. Holding it all together when the stakes are this high.
We're murderers, Francis.
we're not. We're survivors.
If we can't show some respect for one brave man and still accomplish what we set out to do, then I'm disappointed in both of
I
us.
should have never made you ambassador.
I should have never made you president.
Is a central theme through all of this what price power?
Yeah, you know what? As it has been through Greek drama and most of Shakespeare and some of the great theater ever
the price
created.
of power.
I mean, it's for whatever reason, people have always been drawn toward, fascinated by these examinations of this very idea.
What people will do for power.
Yeah.
They will commit crimes. They'll lie, cheat, steal.
Yes, and what's interesting, too, is, if you go back the last 15 years of television, we've had so many interesting examples of characters that are in some way Machiavellian, in some way anti-heroes, characters that are quite complex, and yet these are the very characters that audiences just adore. You Walter White or Dexter, all these, right back to Tony Soprano. So the road has been paved very well for us by the time we arrived.
I like the idea that Frank is one part Dexter and one part Walter White. That's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the relationship between the two of them? Because we see her now wanting to be ambassador to the United Nations.
As was Eleanor Roosevelt.
As was Eleanor Roosevelt. Well, she was not the ambassador. She was like a...
She became an ambassador.
An ambassador.
I believe that after his presidency, not during, and it wasn't a presidential appointment.
Right.
Look, I think that women have been doing incredibly well in politics. We certainly don't have enough women senators or female Congress persons, but I think that there's no doubt that our country is moving, advancing, growing. Women are finding their voice, finding their place, and men are sometimes beginning to listen to them, which is pretty impressive.
That's a very good idea.
But Frank definitely listens to Claire. He's no idiot.
Because it helps him get what he cares most about in life.
Because she's smarter than him.
Is power more important to them than sex?
Well, not on a Sunday night. I mean, come on. Bring the Secret Service in. Come on. Let's have a threesome.
Okay. So his bisexuality comes into this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how does that play a role here? Because there's his biographer, Tom Yates.
It's one of the areas that in the show we haven't been afraid to explore.
I know,
afraid
it's interesting.
To demonstrate.
Was there much discussion of that?
No, not a lot.
First bisexual president? Or?
No, not a lot. Oh, you think, really?
I don't know.
Charlie.
I don't know.
Come on. Have you done your research?
Not that well. No, but tell me more about this.
It's
something that adds to the mix, to the soup.
Absolutely, and adds to the soup. And I think even if Frank didn't declare himself something one way or another, whether he called himself. I had a journalist recently said, "So what's it like playing a closeted gay man?" And I said, "Well, I don't think he is. I think he might call himself bisexual, but he apparently, when he was young, and we explored this in the first season, had a deep affection and perhaps even love for a fellow cadet." And we explored that idea.
Yeah. But I mean, does it say anything about power sharing? Does it say anything about...
No, I just think it's an aspect.
We'll share power and men.
It's an aspect that's interesting in life in which a lot of people are sort of going through all kinds of questions about their own sexuality. And it's just an area that we were never afraid to tackle, and it's been very interesting seeing the reaction to it. And by the way, here's my favorite thing.
Right.
Some people literally would write on Twitter, "I was disgusted by that scene. And I will never watch the show again."
Yes,
and I go, okay, so the murdering you weren't bothered by, but if he makes out with another guy, that's it. That's where you cross the line.
When his wife is present.
It's like, come on, grow up.
So what do we expect to see in terms of the development of these characters?
The remarkable pressures that both Claire and Frank come under, and the different kinds of storylines in terms of governance and what is happening in the world. I mean, suddenly it's no longer about a congressman dealing with issues in his particular state or even issues in Washington, D.C. This is now world politics. This is now a big stage in which every decision you make is going to have repercussions and vibrations and difficulties, and some people will agree with it and some people won't. So I think that's the world has gotten much bigger.
What's
for both
interesting
of them.
about this too is that you have a Russian president who's involved here, whose name what's the name of it? Petrov.
Petrov, yes.
Yeah, now, it's same last name as Putin, same
Amazing
first letter.
coincidence.
I know. Why would you do
It's
that?
extraordinary.
Yeah. So, I mean, what, does he, in your judgment of your writers, sort of share the qualities that they see in Vladimir Putin?
I think it's interesting worlds that we exist in. You know, on the one hand, House of Cards is a fictional world. There's no doubt about it. Although journalists do appear in House of Cards, so it sort of sets it in reality.
Yeah.
And then we obviously
That's
have our
putting
world.
journalists in there.
That's why we put them in.
Yeah, okay.
That's what's real. And then, of course, we have the real world and real world politics, which is very, very different. But obviously, there's lots of people who like to comment on, well, are you trying to say this about the world and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
There is
There
is a kind of parallel universe happening. And what's been the most interesting thing about it is, and I kid you not, this is true, in both Season 1 and Season 2 and now Season 3, we will have discussions about what we want to tackle, the areas that we want to go down, the roads we want to travel. And then Bo and his team will write them, and then we will shoot them. And then about 3 months later, something like what we just did will happen in the world.
The real world.
Yeah. And we'll go, people are going to think we ripped this from the headlines. Yeah. When this finally gets on the air, by the time it airs, people are going to think we ripped this off and that we
so what do your writers
But actually,
know?
we're not. What's I think interesting, and this is just maybe because Bo and his team happen to have their pulse and their finger on a particular pulse
and they
of
seem
what's
to be
happening in the world.
junkies.
And they are. They're definitely political junkies.
Right.
That they've managed to always just be a step ahead of what they can see sort of coming down the road. And it's just been very interesting for us every time, literally in all 3 seasons this has happened. So here's my plan. We write an episode where $550 billion gets put into the arts budget in the government. And let's just see if we can then make that actually happen.
What a great thing that would be.
Wouldn't that be a
arts.
fantastic thing for the
fantastic?
arts?
Does Frank like Frank?
I think Frank probably likes parts of Frank, and Frank probably hates parts of Frank, just like all of us.
And the parts that he doesn't like, he thinks are necessary.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. That's, again, it's a little bit asking me to judge him, and I think
you don't
I
want to
need
judge him
because
you stay away from that. Yeah. Because you are him, and therefore you.
Yeah, because then how could you not wear that on your sleeve?
Yeah.
You know, I need to just play him.
Well, do you like him?
I like playing him, yeah.
Because I'm told people really good, the best actors will say about it, they somehow have to find something about the person they're playing they like.
Yeah.
You know,
Meryl
even
Streep
if it's a guy on death row.
Meryl Streep has said a couple times, I think this is kind of interesting just from an acting standpoint, that she always, whatever character she plays, she creates a secret that only she knows, that's never revealed and that no other characters know. And it always gives her an inner life in which something is going on that nobody knows about, so that she can always have an active mind